They say a campfire never lies. Sit close enough, and the crackle of the fire will whisper truths the daylight tries to hide. My name is Lady Land, and tonight I'll tell you a story about survival on the frontier. It's not about gunslingers or quick draws, but about grit, unity, and one woman who chose to stand when thirst threatened to silence an entire town. The place was Willow Flats, a settlement so small it barely made a mark on the maps carried by passing coaches. Once, there had been trees along the creek, their branches sweeping low over the water. By the time this tale begins, the willows were brittle sticks, and the flats were cracked with dust. Drought had been creeping in for months, stripping away shade, drying out the grass, and hardening every man's temper. But Willow Flats had one treasure, a narrow ditch cut into the earth by shovels, hands, and stubborn will. Folks called it the line. It carried water from a spring up in the basalt hills, down to the livery trough and the schoolyard. Without it, Willow Flats would have been another ghost town swallowed by the desert. The one who kept the line alive was not a sheriff, a preacher, or a wealthy cattleman. It was May Lorimer. Every morning she rolled her sleeves, tied back her dark hair with a strip of cloth, and took her shovel to the ditch. She cleared weeds, lifted silt, and patched the boards that guided water into town. She worked until her shoulders burned and her hands bled, because she knew if the line stopped flowing, the town would stop breathing. But drought doesn't care for devotion, and neither did Deke Parnell. Deke was a rancher with more cattle than sense, and more arrogance than proof. He claimed the spring belonged to him, waving talk of deeds no one had ever seen. To him, water was not a lifeline, but leverage. One hot morning, Deke rode into Willow Flats with 6 of his men, their vests sharp, their eyes mean. He reined up at the trough, leaned from the saddle, and let his smile stretch like a noose. "Miss Lorimer," he said, "you've drawn a line across my ground. Divert half that water south, or tomorrow I'll turn every bucket upside down. Let's see how brave you sound when the sun does the asking." The townsfolk froze. Mothers held children close. The preacher dropped his gaze. Deke's men smirked. Certain fear had already won. But May planted her shovel in the dirt, blade down, handle up like a flag. "You close this line," she said. "You close my life with it. The town will remember which hand pushed." The silence that followed was heavy, almost enough to break. Then, from the porch of the stage stop, a woman stepped forward. She was a traveler, wearing a hat too fine for a place like Willow Flats. Her voice was calm, but her words cut clear. "I'll pay into the ditch," she said. "I came here for a town, not a ranch." Her courage rippled through the crowd. The stage driver rang his bell, its sound sharp as a shot. Fear loosened its grip, and for the first time, Deke's men looked uncertain. That night, lanterns burned along the line. Men, women, and children carried buckets, swung picks, and hauled brush. The miners broke hard ground. The clerk, Tilda Rusk, scribbled every hand that worked into her ledger. Even the preacher, lungs weak as they were, carried boards to shade the tank. Willow Flats had found its backbone. Still, dawn brought trouble. Deke returned with twice as many men and a deputy wearing a polished star. The deputy spoke like a man reciting someone else's script. "This town is stealing water," he declared. "By claim of spring right, by claim of fence, by claim of time worked." The townsfolk wavered. Deke smiled wider, but May held her ground. Beside her, Tilda raised her ledger. "We have records," she said. "Every bucket, every back, every day worked on the line. If we're speaking law, then these pages speak too." Deke sneered. "Ledger scratches won't beat a deed." And just as he reached for the signal, dust rose on the horizon. A rider thundered into town, the stage guard. Beside him rode a surveyor named Abel Kincaid. He carried a tripod, a chain, and a sheaf of plaits rolled tight. He had no swagger, only patience. Without a word, Kincaid set his tripod, stretched his chain, and walked the spring head. He marked stakes, snapped chalk, and measured until the deputy's face turned pale. When he finished, his voice carried like iron. "The spring sits inside county allotment," he said. "By ordinance, it belongs to the town that dug this ditch. This ditch is legal. That fence," he pointed to Deke's south line, "is trespass." The deputy stammered, trying to find footing. Deke's grin cracked into silence. Pride can't argue with a chain. He finally tipped his hat, muttered about mercy, and wheeled his horse. His men followed, their dust trailing behind like shame. That night, Willow Flats gathered at the trough. Children splashed hands in water that tasted sweeter than whiskey. The miners sang half a song before their throats gave out. Tilda closed her ledger with a snap of triumph. The preacher prayed soft, words drifting like smoke. And May, she stood last, shovel by her side, and said, "We drew a line today, not just in dirt, but in what we'll allow. Tomorrow we carry more silt than talk." That's how a line stays a line. The people nodded. For once, they believed the desert could be held back, at least long enough for another dawn. That's the story. No gunfight, no bodies in the street. Just a ditch, a ledger, and a town that refused to bow. The frontier wasn't only about who drew fastest. It was about who stood steady when thirst came calling. And sometimes, the victories worth remembering sound less like bullets and more like water trickling through dust. So when you think of the Wild West, don't just picture jewels at high noon. Picture Willow Flats. Picture shovels scraping at night. Records inked by tired hands. And courage carried in silence. The kind of courage that makes towns instead of graves. I'm Lady Land, and this campfire will keep burning. Each week I'll bring another tale, some drawn from history, some from imagination, all carrying the heart of the frontier. If this story stayed with you, share it, subscribe, and join me here again. Until then, keep your powder dry, your word good, and your eyes on the line where night becomes morning.